Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to our drum roll last Good Fight Friday before the new release. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author, and we're here for a talk with a lovely author friend, Alice Henderson. So she's going to be on in just a second. I just wanted to say people are pre-ordering. It's happening. We are, let's see, 8 days away from Orla Rafferty Seeks Her Fortune coming out. So if you need any information on how to learn about that book that I'm releasing in 8 days, it's down in the description. All right. So now I'm going to bring Alice on to say hello for our lovely interview. Hello.
Hello, Margaret. Thank you so much for having me. And congratulations on your upcoming release. That's so exciting. Only 8 days.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I have to keep remembering to mention it because once you're on the downhill, it's kind of like, yeah, all the work is done. So, like, I don't need to remember anymore. Putting it in the notes, though. So welcome. You're just telling me that you've come off of 4 months out in the wild. So tell us a little bit about what your typical day is like. And now it's never typical. So tell us what you do besides write.
It's amazing. So, I'm a wildlife researcher, and writing is just great because I can do it from anywhere. And so I can take on a lot of these really remote or projects. A lot of them are, I just do pro bono for different nonprofits because my writing allows me to do that. So, it's a
Um,
great, free, wonderful way to
right.
schedule your work. So for this trip, I was mainly focusing on doing bat surveys, and I was also shooting footage for a pika documentary I'm making. Um, for those of you who aren't familiar with the pika, it's a little extremely cute relative of the rabbit, but
Uh-huh.
it lives in very high altitude mountain areas. And during the summer, it collects grasses and flowers, and it just stuffs them all in its mouth. They're just like adorable. And then it cures them in the sun. So it makes these hay piles all over the boulder field where they live. And once it's dry, they pull it down into the nooks and crannies of the boulder field, and they overwinter there. They don't hibernate. So they rely on this food to get them through the winter. But unfortunately, because of climate change and global warming, pikas are very temperature sensitive, and they have to move higher up slope to get to cooler temperatures because they can actually perish in temperatures above 70 degrees. So I'm shooting a documentary about that. I made a little 2-minute one a couple of years ago when California was considering putting them on their endangered species list, which unfortunately didn't happen. And populations are disappearing all over the Great Basin and parts of the Sierra Nevada. So that was cool to shoot them in their natural habitat. They're also very vocal.
Yes.
Um,
The little squeak of the pika and the call is pretty adorable. So we're here to talk about the good fight. And by that, I mean people who are um, active in their communities, active in the political sphere in terms of seeing what is happening and fighting for creating spaces for people who've been marginalized and maintaining spaces so that we can all live together and survive on this earth. And so previously, we've talked about different issues like plus size folks living in spaces where they're, marginalized. We've talked about cozy Latin billionaires. That was Leonore last time. We've talked about other sweeping social change movements, but we're going to focus on climate and environmental today. You are the guest that is like focusing on that. And so it's a good thing because I've got my Climathon hat on. This is the current read. Talking all about climate stuff. So I'm a swim in it in my head right now. So thinking about especially wildlife considerations is new, I think, for me and for many of the other people on the channel. Oh, so we've got lots of people in the chat. I just want to say hey everybody, hi and welcome, and thanks for coming by. Um, Alice has several series, and so 2 series and 1 standalone, and then some other IP work is what I see on the website. So is that what are you most excited about people reading right now? Let's say that.
that is correct. That rundown is correct. So right now I am focusing on my Alex Carter series, which is about a wildlife biologist. And every book focuses on a different endangered species. And it's set in a different area, of course, because the species all occur in different areas. So in that, she goes to these remote areas to see if she can find these endangered species and how to improve habitat for them. But she often runs into dangerous situations because of other interests that want to stop her special interests, like clear cutting, or people that want to do mining, that sort of thing, that can interfere with a species' health and survival. And so that one, I just finished the 5th book in that series. I actually turned that one in a couple of weeks ago. The first one is A Solitude of Wolverines. And that one is set in Montana, and it's about the wolverine, which we only have about 300 left in the lower 48. And they actually, at the time I wrote this book, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was considering listing them as threatened, and thankfully they actually did.
Woohoo!
So they were going to have to come up with a recovery plan. It's a very long process from being considered listed to actually getting change done. And oftentimes the government delays and delays and delays and delays. And just to get the wolverine listed, they had to be sued, I don't know how many times, by different nonprofits. So, and then the next book is A Blizzard of Polar Bears. That one is set in the Canadian Arctic. And of course, we all know polar bears are sort of the mascot of global warming, as they are some estimates that all polar bears might be extinct by 2080. So that's that one. And then my other one is A Ghost of Caribou. I don't know if you could see that. I gave away all my physical copies, so I think that's like too reflective.
That's good.
This one is about the mountain caribou, and it's set in Washington State. And the mountain caribou, actually, we've lost all of ours. They've all become extinct. And Canada, we had 2 left, and they were both females, so obviously the population wasn't going to continue. So Canada took them and incorporated them into one of their herds. But the Canadian mountain caribou is also really in danger of extirpation and extinction. So, and my next one is The Vanishing Kind. That one comes out in March, and it's about jaguars in New Mexico, of which we have about 2 or 3 jaguars left in the entire United States. And there used to be, thousands. So it's really important for me to address these wildlife issues. And in each book, I have a mix of like science and what happened, but with a lot of action and suspense to keep readers turning the pages.
Yes. Agree, Eva.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what I particularly enjoy about Alice's books, and I'm reading Ghost of Caribou right now, because with the authors that I really like, I don't like to read the last book because then I don't have anything left if I need to turn to it. So I'm reading Ghost of Caribou because The Vanishing Kind is just around the corner. But I didn't know about mountain caribou, didn't know about pika, didn't know about wolverines, didn't know about, well, I did know about polar bears because of Coca-Cola. But it's not my expertise at all. But when you get a book that is a book-shaped item, right? It's got a plot, it's got suspense, it's got character development, it's got action, but then you're also being delivered the information about the environment and the dangers and like the really clever ways to exist. Like that's really a bonus. I love that part. So I've got regular questions, but if y'all have questions as well, feel free to pop them in the live chat. So for Good Fight Fridays, like every person I've had on has a sort of different thing that they like to focus on. So obviously we found Alice's. It's like wildlife that are in trouble and need to be highlighted so that their plight can be addressed and we can hopefully save them from extinction. And we've heard a few of the different environmental issues that you've addressed. One of the things that I'm participating in right now is Climathon, and it's reading about climate issues. So we've got oceans, we've got animals, we've got plants, we've got indigenous cultures. We've got a sort of range of issues involved in that. What do you think? I don't know if this will be controversial. What do you think about awareness raising readathons like that? Is there something you should balance them with? You do everything. So for the poor, non-experts among us that are trying to do one small thing, what do you think of readathons like that?
I think they're really important, and it's great for people to read a variety of things. Like you said, all of those different topics that are covered. And the more that people educate themselves on these, and it's so important that there's so many fights to be fought right now, right? I mean, but we can't forget about climate, because if we don't have a planet, all of those other concerns. I mean, we really need to do everything simultaneously and really fight for this stuff. And I think a good way to add to the readathon and reading all these books is maybe go out and do some citizen science, or community science, it's being called now. You don't have to be a citizen. Like,
good
say
point.
if you're reading something about like coral bleaching in the oceans, maybe go out and see if there's a project you can help researchers with. There's a great to sort of back up that knowledge that you're reading about and get some hands-on experience and really see firsthand the effect that you can have, the positive effect you can have as an individual. And plus helping these researchers gather data, which they can then present to government agencies or city council people or what have you, to back this up and get some action going. So if you just read about all the plastic that's entering our oceans, or microplastics entering our brains, participate in a beach cleanup or something like that. And there's a couple websites that are just fabulous for finding these kind of projects. There's sciencestarter.org. It's like sciencestarter.org. And Zooniverse. I can put those in the chats. They're great you can tailor what kind of project you want to help with, be it wildlife or maybe something more climate related. They're really good.
Is Zooniverse just like Z Universe?
It's exactly like, I don't know can everyone see this? Those are the two. Oh, I think I put it in the private chat.
I can copy paste. Yeah. There we go. Excellent. Ooh, Eva says, we have a local cleanup group that's just regular people. Tomorrow's meetup clashes with a food drive pickup for the scouts. But brr. Yeah. And then
it's SciStarter, Margaret. Oh, it's SciStarter, not Science Starter.
There we go.
Cool, thank you. See, that's great. So you're doing both. You're in a local cleanup group and you're also helping with food drive. Like, if we could get all of these efforts that we're making together, and I know it can feel overwhelming, but I do find that the more we do and the more actions we take, the better we feel and more energized we feel when we can see that these things we're doing are making a difference.
Okay, so here's another question. Eva says the tiny snow bunny, she's talking about the pica, sound like a cute picture book to me. Eva's got one under her belt and is working on another children's book, I think, and this is happening just this year for the first time. So this is very exciting, and she's probably pinging with all these ideas, which is great. Please
write a book about tiny snow bunnies. I would buy that.
One of the first times I heard you talk about the work that you do in the field, you were talking about sound tech equipment. And I know Kat Paw will be here later in the chat, and she'll hear about this and get really geeked out and enjoy it. So that's like definitely something that needs experience to be able to fiddle with the knobs and the gears and the decibels or whatever it is, right? But one of the things that I learned about after this election was something called, oh, now I'm going to forget what it was called. It was like vote. It wasn't environmental. It was around the election. It was called vote curing. And I'd never heard of that before. Don't need experience. It's just looking at tiny errors that people make on their ballots and calling them to confirm if this is true and this is their work, and then making it count rather than having it be thrown out. And I was like, why have I never heard of that before? Well, it's a recent innovation in some states, and you can volunteer to help out with it. And I was like, that's so fantastic.
And the vote curing happened in just like record numbers this election. I mean,
Yeah.
some states were like, normally it's about 1% of votes that are kind of tossed out and have their signatures verified or whatever. But it was like up to like 6% and stuff in some states. So
Mm-hmm.
next time you vote, everyone, keep by
Yeah.
your phone or email, whatever you have registered with your local state.
Clerk and county recorder, I think is
That
what
would probably, yeah, let you know.
we have a Randy here for the first time. Randy is from a Mighty Blaze. Lovely to see you. And we have a Melissa. Lovely to see you. And a Jocelyn. I think Randy wrote in a question, so I'm going to wait on that. And I have the right links in here. Okay, good. Pika, Eva. Let's see. What are you researching now if it's not a spoiler?
So my
For your next book, not for the
yes.
field work that you were just talking about.
So for the book coming up, I had to research a lot about jaguars and what's been done to decimate their population. They're actually gone extinct in some countries in South America. And the ones we have a population that used to freely cross the border between Mexico and all across the Southwest. So Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, even parts of California. Colonists even report seeing jaguars like in Ohio and places like that, which is really interesting. And the Carolinas. So, but now, like I said before, we have 3 left.
Yeah.
And I've surveyed for jaguars in New Mexico. So I put out remote cameras and bioacoustic recorders, hoping to get their vocalizations or get pictures of them just north of the Mexico border. So I had to do a lot of research about border security. And obviously, there's a lot more species than jaguars that are affected by an impenetrable border wall.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to cross over into the states to mix with new populations. And a lot of species that live in, say, like a national park or an island can be subject to genetic isolation, which means they start inbreeding and there's a lot of mutations.
Yeah.
And so if species aren't able to cross into an area where they can find new mates or food sources, that can really genetically mess them up. The Florida panther is a great example of that. Their population just shrank and shrank, and they had all these terrible mutations. And they imported some females from another state. And in just a couple generations, so many of those mutations had resolved themselves. So I had to do research about border, like there's these huge 30-foot tall impenetrable, what they call pedestrian borders. But there's also other alternatives. There's vehicle barricades, which wildlife can move around, but vehicles can't. But also now today, with all of our modern technology, we could have digital surveillance and motion detectors and things like that to monitor the border if that would allow wildlife to cross. So there was a lot of research about that, and also about this thing called the Real ID Act, which happened after 9/11. And that essentially allowed the federal government to waive every single law that it could, like National Antiquities Act, Endangered Species Act. They can just violate all of them to get the border wall built. So that was interesting.
I had a question in my head and it just went out when I thought you was comment. What was it? It was, I mean, I had a different question about how you come across all these sad facts and like manage to be active and keep going and like find joyful moments. And I say you sort of like told us like being active and taking action is part of the remedy. Um okay, stop distracting me, Eva. Let's see. Let's go back to the outline here and pick the next question. Here we go. Oh, see, like I'm just like veering off course here because of all the other thoughts occurring in my brain. Okay.
Feel free to veer if you would like.
Um, let's see. It was something about, hold on a second. I almost had it. I had like the handkerchief end and I forgot it again. It's something about tech stuff in your books. And I can't remember.
Maybe how to balance it without bogging down the narrative or something like that.
I mean, we can start there.
Yeah.
You've got characters, you've got plot, you've got a lot of like suspense in your books. And so how do you picture the structure? Like, do you think it all out beforehand and then like sort of engineer as you go, or do you do a draft that's messy and then go back? How do you envision those beforehand?
This sounds so boring, right? But I make a spreadsheet and I
Okay.
plot out every main scene I want, and just briefly, like in a sentence or two, what happens in that scene and whose point of view it's from. Although with my Alex Carter series, most of it is from her point of view. There's some scenes from other people's points of view, but I don't outline it to death to where I'm just like, oh, now you have to write this, and there's still room for some surprises. So I'll plot out the scenes that I want, and then I'll figure out where can I put wildlife facts where it's not going to bog down the suspense or action or pace of the book. But those wildlife facts are so important, right? And I also don't want them to be super dry so that you're reading this ponderous tome about Wolverine extinction. So I try to balance it out throughout the book. And then I reword all of the facts to be engaging, I hope, and interesting and lively. And I intersperse them in areas where, like the lulls in the action and things like that. So it's a real balancing act. Action and suspense and fight scenes are my favorite thing to write.
You write
So,
them really well. I was
well, thank you.
Blizzard of Polar Bears. It's a similar feeling to when I was reading Dry by Neil Shusterman. Like, it was so realistic, it was so like heart pounding, and I had that same feeling when you were out on the ice and when you're running around, and they were like, yeah, violent acts, and I was on the edge of my seat, and my heart rate was elevated.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment. And what I'll do is, after I finish my spreadsheet, I then write the book. I'll do a draft of the book. And it's nice because, those some mornings you get up and you're like, what do I write next? Or you can feel kind of stuck. And I just look at my spreadsheet and I know this is the scene. And then I color code all the scenes as like one color for action, one color for like character development, sort of a peaceful moment in the book. And I just make sure it's all balanced by just a glance looking at the color and how if there's a big old lull and then a little tiny action thing, I'll balance that out. So that's how I plan the books out. And it works pretty well. And I have a weird way of writing. I think it's weird. I have a little portable word processor that I take with me into the field, a little Alpha Smart. And my favorite thing to do is write back at camp in the pitch black at night. Or I'll sit outside gazing at the mountains or something and write in camp, which I just love. But sometimes if I'm writing on my Alpha Smart in the dark, or I have it tucked in my sleeping bag writing, I'm always afraid I've somehow turned it off. That's just happened before. So I'll be writing, oh yeah, I love this scene. And then I'll pull because I have to tuck into the sleeping bag because it's too cold, right?
Yeah.
I'll pull my Alpha Smart out and find that none of what I wrote was actually recorded. No.
Alpha Smart is one of those things that it's just a word processor, right? Like it's from 1993 kind of thing.
Exactly.
Those
Yes. I think they made them until like 2010, maybe.
Okay.
They weigh like a pound and they run for 700 hours on 3 AA batteries. And
yeah,
they're great. I
yeah.
love it.
You said you set up to find signs of jaguars. No signs? Are you going to check another area? I'd freak out if I saw one. What the question is there? You set up to find signs of jaguars. No signs? Do you move to another area? I'm not sure. Maybe you understand what she's asking.
So the jaguar, I did not, alas, find jaguars. It was on there's a land trust that I volunteer with, and they had a huge parcel that someone has very kindly put a conservation easement on in New Mexico, and it's just amazing. I mean, what so generous of someone to do this. So that land's all protected from development. So went out there with my bestie, and we set up these cameras and bioacoustic equipment, and waited and checked the footage. And alas, there were no jaguars. It's kind of near the Gila National Forest, and there was another jaguar researcher there who was trying to find them there. And it's definitely an area where there should be jaguars and had been jaguars in the past. I did find an endangered bat there, though, so that was good.
Silver lining, yeah.
So, alas, yeah. So then normally, exactly like with the bats that I do, traveled all over the country recording, looking for endangered bats at different of these protected wildlife sanctuaries, and found a lot of areas that did have endangered bats where we could improve habitat. But with the jaguar, that happened to be the only wildlife sanctuary in that area where there's potential jaguar habitat. So that was our one go. And it sure would be great if they were able to return to that area. And that's where my book of Vanishing Kind is set, is in that Gila National Forest area.
And so I had a question that we were going to ask about, like, how do you choose the species? And I think this is definitely related. How do you decide the next location? And is it where you're researching in real life? Does that just get like folded into like next chapter?
That's a great question. So the first book, A Solitude of Wolverines, I did indeed get the idea while I was in Montana setting up bioacoustic recorders and cameras to see wolverines or wolves were on this wildlife sanctuary up there. And I thought, why aren't I writing about this? You know, it's so remote, it's isolated, like sometimes it's creepy being out there, you know, humans are scary. And I thought, this would be really cool, you know, like each book could be about a different animal. And so that first book, Wolverines, was like definitely inspired by where I was in real life researching. And then I decided after that, I was going to pick species that are really, really in trouble. And that was going to be how I chose them. And then that, therefore, chooses the location as well. So I knew polar bears were really not doing well, so that I decided to set it in the Canadian Arctic, which I spent a lot of time up there. And I was actually, that one is set on Western Hudson Bay, but the time I spent in the Arctic is up by Tuktoyaktuk, so it's on the western side of Canada in the Arctic. But I just fell in love with the Arctic up there. I mean, it was so incredibly beautiful, the tundra. And I was up there long enough that it was green when I arrived. And then fall came and the tundra turned all these beautiful reds and golds and oranges. And then winter just hit hard when we were trying to leave. Oh my gosh, we drove out in like a total blizzard condition. So it was so neat seeing it in these different seasons. And then with the mountain caribou, I was so frustrated with that situation because nonprofits, they listed the caribou as endangered, the Fish and Wildlife Service, on the Endangered Species Act, but then didn't really do anything to help them. And as I said, it's a decades-long process getting them listed, right? And then getting a recovery plan in place and then doing that recovery. So all of these things that had endangered caribou in the first place were still happening, like clear cutting and logging roads, and of course climate change. Caribou need dense snowpack because for the winter they survive on pulling these lichen down from trees. So they need like tall snow to stand on to reach this lichen hanging down, and as snowpack decreases they can't reach it. And so anyway, they just delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and then we lost all of them. So I really wanted to bring attention to that. It would be nice if some habitat restoration could take place and we could get some of our caribou moving back south. And then for jaguars, and so that, I should say that necessitate, get talk, that made Washington State and the interior rainforest, the setting for that, because that's where our
Right.
last caribou were. And then for jaguars,
Yeah,
there's
lovely.
just none left, and there's like a couple crossing into Arizona right now. But so, and that meant that I would set the book in the American Southwest.
Um, so when you're doing activist work, that's a lot of paperwork, a lot of reading, it sounds like. Then you've got field work. I'm sure you've got like certifications you got to keep up to date for your scientist credentials. Then you've got writing. Then you've got like publishing and marketing. What takes up the most time and what is your favorite thing to do?
My absolute favorite thing to do is if I'm out in the field working on a wildlife project and going back to camp at night and writing. So like those two
Combo.
put together, I just love it so much. And I love, it sounds nerdy, but I use a lot of geographic information systems
It's a nerd safe space, Alice. You're good.
to like map locations or do habitat suitability analysis. And I love keeping up on that tech and, keeping my GIS certification up. It's pretty fun. It's amazing what we can do now just from your laptop. And at Ghost of Caribou, she does some of that stuff using maps to help figure out where species are and where murderers might be.
Thank you, Hedy Lamar. I think she started YouTube and like the GIS stuff back in the day. So I remembered my question that I forgot a bit ago, but I think I'm gonna go to Randy's here. He says, I grew up on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and I'm not familiar with this. He says, are your books the literary equivalent for raising awareness of the bookish set? Who's that? Do you know what he's talking about?
I do indeed. Yes, I have seen Wild Kingdom myself. What a great show. And I would say yes. Like, I don't know about you, but parts of that show that I most like stick in my mind are like was it on that show when the guy got the anaconda on his arm and they all had gone out to the host and the camera crew and everyone had gone out to film and one guy was left behind. I can't remember why, but he was behind in camp and this anaconda came and it swallowed his arm up to his shoulder. And he was a huge wildlife fan. He didn't want to hurt the snake.
Oh.
So he waited for them to come back with this anaconda on him. And then they took a piece of metal. So snake teeth go backward. They angle backwards. So if they bite you, you can't just pull it off. Okay. Oh, and he knew that snakes, when they constrict you, they start wrapping at the tail and then go all the way up. So he held up the tail above his head so it couldn't start wrapping. Wow. With the snake on his arm. And then they came back to camp and used a piece of metal to like slide down under the anaconda's fang. So then they could slide the snake down a little bit and then slide in the snake. They got the snake off unharmed. But it's situations like that I really remember, or that stick in my mind about shows like that. So I hope that these Alex Carter novels, you remember the action and the anaconda on your arm, but also you are learning about these species and why it's so important to protect them. So,
oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't remember stuff like that. I remember like Highlights magazine and I remember the Discovery Channel and sort of like documentaries, but nothing that exciting. No anacondas like that.
I think I watched that episode in like a class or something like that. Yeah. It definitely wasn't when it was on the air, but you can find them still. Those episodes.
Oh my gosh. Randy says that show's been on air for 30 to 50 years. It's all right. So one of the things that I am wary of in my books, because I write more about like the labor movement and gender disparities and stuff like that, especially in the Victorian era and like the enfranchisement, voting public and everything. So one of the things that I'm wary of is putting that information in and sounding too earnest for people to like buy into it. So when I'm reading your books, the character is straightforward and earnest and like wants to do her part. Alex Carter is like a badass. So when I am I should probably channel her like her energy when I'm giving it to my Victorian heroine. What do you think about balancing like a typical reader today who is probably pretty cynical about stuff and the person you want to be the carrier of your message who has to have like pure heart and like lots of knowledge? Does that ever come up in terms of how do I balance those two or not?
It does often. And I think there's another balancing act with this kind of addressing these kind of issues in fiction is hope. Like if you write a book that has no hope, the reader could like, oh, this is terrible, the species is going extinct, the federal government's not doing anything about it. Oh, well, there's no hope, it's going to die. The reader could walk away thinking, well, wait a minute, it's still in existence, this species. There's something maybe I could do to help it. Or the reader might walk away and say, oh, well, then I may as well not act.
Yeah.
Or if you write with too much hope, like, oh, Alex Carter's going to fix this, the federal government's going to list this animal in the Endangered Species Act, the reader might walk away and say, oh, okay, well, then I don't need to do anything.
Right.
Or they might think, hey, if Alex Carter's doing something, maybe I could do something like that. So it's kind of hard to gauge how a reader is going to walk away from your book. And with cynicism, like just you mentioning and your work addressing women's rights in the Victorian period, it's like, gee, aren't you glad everything is so much better now? I felt that cynic, like, oh yeah, wage disparity, huh? Like, so it is tough. Like, I think, and you talked about earlier, like you write about this depressing stuff. How do you not let it get to you? And of course, there's moments I think where all writers that write about this stuff and people that are experiencing this stuff just feel these bleak, hopeless moments. It's like, oh my gosh, I just don't know how I'm going to go on. But if there is a way to like inspire people, and I think maybe starting with little things or local things, so like that they could act on, could maybe inspire them. Like in the back of all of my books, I talk about things people can do, where they can go to learn more about the species, actions that they can take to help the species or help with climate change. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of gorging myself right now on sources of books and podcasts and whatever that are talking about post-election slump. Like we're all in a sort of fit of despair and we need to figure out how do we get out of this. And in the climate case, like what I'm reading for Andrew Boyd and nonfiction is a lot about addressing like we have to sort of lose hope so that we get that like ignition of we have to do this because it's the right thing rather than thinking someone's going to come save us and that's our last hope. There's no Superman, like it's us folks. So there's a lot of both and in his book, which I appreciate, and it is galvanizing. It is sort of a strengthening of the okay, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to take a step today kind of thinking, which is good. But the podcast that I'm watching, like they're looking back at 20 or 30 years ago, or I'm actually reading this book with a friend for Climathon, No Logo, which is about branding marketing by Naomi Klein. And it's the root of all this stuff, like the beginning of the end, it feels like the infiltration of the space and the hands in the air kind of like, well, corporations are going to take over. What are we going to do? And we haven't done anything in the last 25 years, it feels like, based on what was brought up in the book. So it's both very discouraging, but also, what do I say? But also when we're at this final like level where we're kind of looking at it going, we're going to have a lot of extinctions no matter what we do. Like, are we going to survive this as humans? Like, who knows? And the only way to try for that being a possibility is to do something about it. So you can either go gently into that dark night and like have no hope for your kids and next generations, or you can try something. And so I think that gives that little spark of like, I want to be on the right side. I want to try something. I want to be someone that they look back to and say, well, at least they tried, you know? So, oof.
I
Therapy
agree.
time.
I've been thinking a lot about this and how many of us grew up watching cool adventure films, or like, you're a little kid and you dream about, fighting the good fight, or Star Wars, or Willow, or Goonies, or whatever you grew up on.
Indiana
And you think,
Jones.
wow,
Yeah.
I'd like to have like, this grand fight for justice and this grand adventure like that. And then, we grow up and it's like, we get our jobs and like, where was that grand adventure? Where's that? And I've been thinking lately, it's all around us. This fight to protect the planet and protect our human rights is all around us. That's our grand fight. That's what we need to be acting on. This is our chance to be the last starfighter, or Luke Skywalker, or whatever you want to
Right.
say, or whatever hero you identify with. This is our chance. And we can live that life of adventure and action and, seek justice. Um, and and I think too that reaching out in that kind of way to people might help. I mean, this idea is sort of fresh in my mind, but um, to get people out of that, like, sort of, I think people don't take action. When they don't take action, it's usually sort of a mix of like hopelessness, or they just don't know where to start, or they just, like you say, feel like, well, like, do I just sit by and do nothing? I was going to say something about the no logo, and it went right out of my head.
Oh, have you read it? Did you read it 20 years ago? Like, looking forward looking, Alice.
I don't remember. Shoot.
She's also come out with This Changes Everything, which is specifically climate focused, which I'll read next year, and Doppelganger, which also incorporates bits of climate science and stuff. So I haven't read those yet, but I'm reading like her old school one she got famous for, if that helps. Is that what it was jogging the memory?
Shoot, no. I do want to say that if a lot of people out there are feeling sort of like discouraged about how slow federal action takes place, that, you mentioned corporations and like local things, local council people, local initiatives, and corporations. Like we powered them. They can't exist without us. And if we start speaking out or boycotting about these corporations that are, making everything unaffordable here and damaging the environment, and we have a lot of power there. That, our banks invest in disastrous projects, mining projects, and clear cutting projects, and we have so much power as consumers that I think we could utilize.
Yeah. And it may be more obvious to connect the doer to the deed locally, rather than like world corporations that have things happening and you can't see. So you can't like tie the court system to the actual bad deed, because that can be really tricky. Yeah. Randy says, entertainment infused with education and learning is ideal. Yes. Oh, he says zoo books.
Zoo books, yes, zoo books. Oh, love those.
I'm out of the loop on this one.
I want to say they're published by, is this right? The National Wildlife Federation. They have like Ranger Rick, and then they have
that one I know.
Ranger Rick Jr. And then they have zoo books, which they're not magazines, they're actual nice little picture books with amazing photographs in them. And they're all in different species. I've got the bat one.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, those are great.
So I'm always curious what interactions authors have with readers. And one of my fellow authors likes to ask people when he's interviewing authors, what feeling do you want people to have at the end of reading your book? And when you talk to your readers, what feelings do they have? So that's my two-part question. What do you end up getting connections with? or on?
I really want readers to fall in love with these animals like I have, and to feel inspired to take action. And um, even if that's, something small, like helping with the watershed cleanup in their local river, or writing to their local council person or representative, for what that's worth now. Um, I really think that I want them to feel charged up and excited, and hey, I can do something. That's my hope.
Yeah.
And I do hear from readers that they've like donated to a nonprofit after learning about wolverines, or that they've gone out and participated in community science. And it always makes me feel so good to hear that, because I mean, and I think, Margaret, you and I have talked about this before. I thought about, should I write nonfiction about these species? And I realized that, like, a book about wolverines that was nonfiction would only reach a small audience, probably, of people who already knew what they were. And so I thought, well, if I write action and suspense and then focus on these animals, maybe this will reach new people,
Yeah.
and a whole new set of, people who could potentially work for some change. And it's really worked out that way. And I'm so happy. And I love hearing that from readers, that they've been inspired to go out and do something.
In your wildest marketing dreams, do you envision an event where you partner with Hugh Jackman to put the record straight about what Wolverines actually are and bring attention to it? Because, I mean, wouldn't that be perfect?
That would be perfect. Mr. Jackman, if you're watching, let's do a Wolverine mashup and
Yeah,
really drive home the message.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, that was one thing that was interesting when I first came out with Wolverine, Solitude of Wolverines, is a lot of readers were writing, hey, I didn't even know
Yeah.
that this was a real animal. I only was familiar with Hugh Jackman's X-Man. So that was really cool. Like, wow, yay, like
Yeah.
this is working. People are learning about this amazing animal.
Yeah. I um I don't know if I'm less than average informed about animals, but I don't think I knew about most of the species that you've highlighted being in the US, or like what their habitats were, or what their um not lifestyles, but practices. I can't think of the word that you use for animals. Anyway, just didn't learn about it in school. Like, didn't have enough science classes for that to be part of my general knowledge. And so, like, if that is something that's present in the general population, fiction is like a really good way to fill in those gaps and get people curious and like pulling on the heartstrings, I think.
I agree, and I didn't learn about this stuff in school either. I was obsessed with wildlife as a kid, and when I was like 6, I learned what extinction was.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't something that happened millions of years ago to the dinosaurs alone. It's happening right now. We're in the middle of what scientists are calling the Anthropocene extinction, where we're losing just massive percentages of, one estimate is 10,000 species a year are vanishing. And many of those we don't even know exist, that they're being destroyed in the rainforests. Um, so, and I started like circling petitions around, and I would like muck out cages at my local wildlife rescue center, and I would go door to door, like selling coffee out of my Muppet thermos, and get neighbors to like 25 cents for a cup of coffee. Of course, they're all drinking out of the same cup, right?
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Yeah.
and like I would paint, I had gravel driveway growing up. I would paint the rocks gold and sell them for 25 cents for a gold nugget.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. And then I would donate all that money to like Greenpeace or Defenders of Wildlife or something like that.
Yeah.
But luckily, my parents were very supportive of my being obsessed with wildlife, and they were really into nature and would take um, camping trips and stuff like that with me. So I was really lucked out. But yeah, I didn't learn about this stuff either. And I think one thing to really drive home is how interconnected everything is. Like, with what's happening right now, we're also experiencing an insect apocalypse. Like, the insect numbers worldwide are down 50%, and we've lost about 27% of insect species, and we rely on them to
Yeah.
pollinate our food. So if we don't figure this out, I mean, we're going to see starvation even more than we're already experiencing. And
Right.
everything's connected.
Yeah. I just learned recently that magnolias, I'm forgetting words because again, science education. Um, Instead of honeybees like other plants, magnolia trees, not the western ones, but like the southern magnolias, use beetles because they were around before bees existed, or and I was like, so cool. And then I think I heard my niece say that she doesn't eat, what was it? Some kind of fruit that's pollinated by like the wasp dying or something. And I was like, like, there's science knowledge that you can learn and like incorporate and go, wow, that's really cool. That's amazing that the world works this way. And then there's science knowledge that some people discover and go, ew, I don't want that now. And you're just like, can you just grow up? The world works. You're part of it. Oh my
That's
God.
funny.
Yeah.
One thing just about bees and pollinators. You know how people are talking about bee colony collapse and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Honeybees. Honeybees are actually not native to the U.S. Isn't that interesting? They came from Europe, brought over to Jamestown, the first colony, and we have all of these super cool native bumblebees and pollinators that. Well, if you want to do a cool rabbit hole, like look up all of our amazing native bees, like they are so cool, and unfortunately they don't get the attention that the honeybee gets. I mean, the honeybee definitely needs attention too, but they're really neat, and they need our help too.
I know someone who will be very happy you mentioned that. Our booktube's own Beth Ann. She's over on the East Coast, but she's a bee scientist, and so like every time I see a bee in a book, I'm like, Beth Ann. You would love that. I'm sure she knows many bumblebee types that are native. It's very cool.
There's a cool. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
There's a really great nonprofit called the Xerces Society, and they specialize in invertebrates. And they have this cool thing called Bumblebee Watch. If anyone out there wants to help our native bumblebees, you just take a little picture of the bumblebee you've spotted, and if you know the species, you can tag it. If not, they'll have someone come through and ID it for you. And you can see they also have a milkweed mapper if you're interested in helping monarch butterflies, and you can map where you've seen milkweed plants, and then see where everyone else is seeing different bumblebees and milkweed. It's a really neat community science project.
It is cool. Did I get that right? Xerxes, like the Persian XER,
It's
XES?
Xerces.
Of course.
I don't think I can join the chat, but I can send it
No.
to you.
Yeah, private chat.
Oh, help if I could spell. Me write good, me spell. Okay. Did you get that, Margaret?
Yes. You're right. Eloise, it's a fig, right? I couldn't remember the name of the fruit. I couldn't remember the verb for like procreate with fruit. I'm not doing well tonight for whatever reason. So sorry, guys.
You know, you should tell your friend what else pollinates figs is bats. So maybe she could feel better about it, knowing that bats are.
I mean, they don't die within the fruit. I think something with the wasp crawling in and like being part of a fig is why she wouldn't eat figs. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thank you, Eloise. Jocelyn says, I love honeybees. They're my favorite insect. So smart. Orchard mason bees are super awesome too, and a gorgeous color. Excellent. It seems like you should probably weigh in on this this website, Jocelyn, and figure out the Bumblebee Watch. That'd be cool. Eloise says, I've got all the pollinator-friendly plants in my yard. I love watching the bees go to town on the mint that's trying to take over.
That is so important. Thank you for planning that. And that's one thing we can all do. You know, you think about these massive wildlife sanctuaries that allow grizzly bears and wolves and these other large carnivores to move through, elk and moose. But pollinators, you could just have your little patch in your yard, and that's going to help. And they move from patch to patch. So that is a little sanctuary, if you will, that everyone can do. And you don't have to be a gazillionaire and buy hundreds of thousands of acres to protect. Although I would do that if I were a gazillionaire. That is where my money would go.
I was reading this one, Seaweed Chronicles, and she's talking about the Gulf of Maine. So this is Susan Hand Shutterly. She's talking about seaweed in the Gulf of Maine and the fact that they started out with these huge cod and other big species that would come into the different gulfs and ledges along the Gulf. And then, as soon as they overfish, they go down to the next thing. And so they've gone through like a dozen or more species over the past 200 years of colonizing the oceans and harvesting them. And she used a phrase that I think was like, harvesting down the food chain or something like that. And that's why they've arrived at now they're harvesting seaweed, because all of the fish species are like gone from that area, except for a tiny little part that's protected. So yeah, I've got a tiny little patio out here, and I can do pollinators and I can do birds. So like when I put stuff out, it's for the small species, because no elk, no grizzlies, none of the big game are going to be coming over to my patio 3 stories up. It's just kind of funny.
I guess a giraffe.
Maybe, yeah. Jocelyn gives thumbs up. I've put clover in my yard, and in the spring specifically, time mowing to keep the bees safe and fed when the clover is blossoming. That's smart.
Awesome.
Smart.
And also people should leave their leaves in the fall, because a
That's
lot
what I
of
was gonna say.
Oh, yay. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the Leave the Leaves campaign that Alexis Black Forager on Instagram was doing. And I said, the only part I would say where I have reservations, if it's on a sidewalk, then I would say, please move the leaves so that we don't slip and fall on the sidewalk. But yeah, on lawns for sure. So I'm glad someone's paying attention. That's great.
Yeah, they like to sleep under the leaves and overwinter there, and butterfly larvae too do that. So
So Randy has a good question. I actually have a question that sort of links up with this again, which I was going to ask. Do you have a favorite nonfiction on climate wildlife? So if you're studying all this stuff and you get really deep into the scientific articles and journals and stuff, maybe pull back a layer and think about, like, what would you recommend? Like your best nonfiction rec. And then Randy's question is, which scientist or activist is your favorite? And maybe they've written that book. I'm just to give you an idea.
I would say, boy, there's so many great books, Margaret. For climate, I really liked Katharine Hayhoe's book, Saving Ourselves.
Ooh.
Because one of the most important things we can do is talk to other people and to get action going. Because I think a lot of us are sort of suffering silently, or maybe we don't want to be a downer, like at a party or with our friends, so we're not bringing the stuff up. But probably your friend is also feeling this way and isn't bringing it up. So being able to talk to people, including, and one of the great things about Hayhoe's book is she tells you how to talk to people that maybe don't agree with you at all, by like finding common ground. Like, say you're talking to someone who doesn't believe climate change is even real.
Yeah.
And like if you're, say, like Lake Tahoe, where the ski season just gets shorter and shorter and shorter because of global warming, you could say to that person, don't you love to ski? Wouldn't it be great if the snow season was long like it used to be? And you find this common ground and can engage. What can we do to, help the snow season get back to normal? So that's a great one. And then there's a thing called Project Drawdown. And it's all of these ways you can draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that are environmentally friendly. And some are small projects you could do, some are large projects you do with your community, like changing your farming techniques and things like that. That one is great. And the founder of Project Drawdown just came out with another book. So there's 2 books in that series that highlight all these different ways. It's really powerful work. As for my favorite activist / scientist, I gotta say Jane Goodall. Like, I'm so inspired by her. And leading up to the election, I don't know if anyone noticed, she had this great campaign called Vote for Nature. And she was traveling all around. She went to the Global Citizens Festival and went on stage with I
didn't know about that.
Coldplay and
Uh-huh.
Post Malone, and got to speak to their crowds. And she's walks around with this sign, Vote for Nature. And it's just amazing just to get the word out about how we need to act now to save the planet. We can't wait any longer.
I love that unlikely pairings. Like when I was seeing things like, I don't know, I've never heard of this podcast. I've never heard of this show, but like brat, what's that? You know, like I was sort of waking up to some of these things and the unlikely pairing of politicians who care, you know, and people who have an audience, like people who have an audience that that politician wants to reach. It's an interesting thing. So when you're talking about music artists and environmentalists, it's like getting people talking may allow them to find common ground, which is great. I love it.
Yeah.
Jocelyn already looked. She says Xerxes has a Western monarch account, so she's excited about that.
Indeed. And you can volunteer to go, if you're on the West Coast, to do the winter count down in Santa Cruz, where all of the monarch butterflies, they're so great. They just hang on these tendrils from the trees, the eucalyptus groves, and you can count little butterflies if you want.
Yeah, we had a place near where I grew up that's called Monarch Grove, and I don't know if they go there anymore. It was like within 20 miles, but I don't know that they winter that far south anymore. Because if you're saying Santa Cruz, I don't know how many places they have like that on the California coast, but climate change is 100% the reason why I went without power for so long this week. Hotter summers are making it so certain cedar trees are dying. They're temperature sensitive like the pika than the windstorms. Yeah. Yeah. Bomb cyclones, dying trees, beetles expanding their habitat, you know, area, like, yeah, not dying over the winter. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyone
Oh man,
the dots, there you go.
the whole Western US and Canada, like, I don't know if you guys, I was just heartbroken this summer. I was camped in Banff National Park and was heading up to camp in Jasper National Park, and this massive wildfire like destroyed hundreds of thousands of hectares up there. And it was because the mountain pine beetle, which normally dies out in the winter, it's so warm, they're not, and it's just decimated these forests up there. And then with everything warming up and these trees drying out, it was just ripe for this disastrous wildfire that burned down a chunk of the town and everything, this beautiful historic town. And it was heartbreaking. So yes, and then, flooding and these hurricanes that now are so intense, they go beyond the category 5, like they need to come up with a new category for them.
Yeah. Well, and they also go where they didn't used to go, like the mountains of Appalachia. Like that's crazy. Yeah.
They're thinking that, I mean, now they're going hundreds, the effects are happening hundreds of miles inland. And now I just listened to a podcast that a climate scientist thinks soon there'll be 1,000 miles inland, the effects.
Speaking of GIS tech, I don't know if you're on TikTok, but maybe it made its way over to Instagram. There was a guy who, after Hurricane Helene, was actually doing a public service of whatever software he had that had a topo map. And he was explaining, like, this is where the water is going, and this is why it's going in this direction, and this is why this is all flattened, and this is, there's still water flowing out. And it was like, oh, now, you get it if you can see how things are going. But I mean, if you're not, if that's not your job, how would you know? So
GIS wins again.
Yeah. Jocelyn says red clover. Eloise says no, micro clover. Not as tall, but I love my audience knowing these things. Please share. I love it. Eloise says the windstorms come in, which are stronger again, thanks climate change, and blow over all the trees that died over the summer. Not as blatant as flash floods, but still pervasive. Yeah. Someone during the bomb cyclone was saying, yeah, the hurricane may not be as strong, but we have murder trees here. Do you have murder trees in Florida? No, you don't. Yeah. Some in their yard. Perennial, low growing, and lovely blooms. Like, I think we need, okay, what do you think of this? So language is important. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe this would have an unintended effect. But when I think of people getting together to talk about climate things, one of the things that would happen is that, like, we'll be grieving all the things we're losing. And then we'll be talking about the things we love. And then we'll be sort of able to say, okay, what can we do in our local communities? If we took something like truth and reconciliation as a name for that type of activity, would that make sense? Or would that, like, steal the thunder from that process? and instead of inspiring different kinds of processes, like distract. I don't know. What do you guys think? This is top of my head. I'm like,
I like it. It's like looking at the harsh truth, but knowing we can prevent this hopefully from happening with other species. I like that truth and reconciliation.
yeah.
I
Okay.
think one, it's tough to like, this is the other balancing act is you don't want people to feel guilty because that can lead to an action like, well, fine, then I'm a big loser jerk and humanity is a loser jerk. So I think, yeah, feeling like you have like humanity may have done this to the planet, but humanity can also have the power to stop doing this and help.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of great conversations happening now post-election. I could just say that. Like we're in our feelings, but we're also like trying to do something about it, at least the people that I see. And so I'm encouraged actually. Not the day or two after, but like in the last couple of weeks I've definitely been encouraged. So yeah, hopefully we find that spark that is, here's what we've done. We realize it's bad. We realize that we were inactive and indecisive for too long. And here's what we can do now to try to address that wrong. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, come together.
Yes.
You have reconciliation. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Eloise. One of the things that happened post-election was that a lot of people left Twitter, and you came up with a great idea that was
Oh
about
yeah.
and this thing called a starter pack, which I have just started on. I mean, I'm not advertising it anywhere. I'm just sort of like trying things out and like trying to learn how to ride the bike. But Blue Sky has these things called starter packs, which is like, you're new here. Here's your interest. Follow these people. Here are their bios. What do you think about a starter pack for climate and wildlife? Have you thought about that or started one?
I have. I haven't started it yet, but as you mentioned earlier, I've written some media tie-in novels like for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Supernatural and stuff. And we have a media tie-in starter pack where it just makes it really easy to go down and click on all the other media tie-in writers that are on Blue Sky. And I thought this would be cool. We could do a starter pack for writers and people that are interested in helping with climate change or species extinction. So I'm going to start collecting like names of people that would be interested in doing that on Blue Sky and put a starter pack together.
There's a massive one. So they can be a little intimidating. I follow Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and she went from Twitter to Blue Sky, and she had one that was like all the climate people she'd work with on her last book, and it was like 100 plus. I was like, I sort of glazed over after 35, and I'm like, okay, I need to come back. I can't read anymore. Like my judgment is gone. But yeah, very valuable to have those all in one place to like, like-minded people. Here's how you can learn more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you send me that link, Margaret? That starter
Yes.
pack? Okay, cool.
I will find it. It is like 2 days ago. I'll find it and send it to you. Eloise got a link. PT Lawn Seed. Alternative lawn seed source. All right. Excellent. We also need to dismantle the systems that make it difficult for individuals to enact change. Nobody living in an HOA, will want to plant lawn alternatives when they could get fined for it. Valid point.
Yep. Xerces.org, by the way, has a really cool native plant finder. So no matter where you live, you can plug in your location and they'll give you a list of all the native seeds and where you can buy them, which is great. Yeah, that's such a good point about the HOA. My mother had an all native plant garden and she didn't live in an HOA, but the city would come by and ticket her for not having this chem lawn, and she would just never pay the tickets. like, screw you. But man, her yard was just full of wildlife.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a interesting discussion like about trees. We were considering as a family what to do with the palm trees in the yard because there was a scary moment a few weeks ago where a bunch of really large palm fronds fell down and like could have killed somebody both in the yard and out on the sidewalk. And we were like, oh, okay, I guess it's time to do some maintenance, but also the palm trees aren't native to California. Do we take something down that's been there for like 90 years? carbon wise, like, no, you don't want to take down a tree, but like safety wise, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. I love that starter pack. Yeah. Good
We should
idea.
get that going. And yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we were all over the place, but I think we covered a lot of different interesting things. Was there anything else that you like wanted to cover about writing and the good fight and what you're working on at the moment and what's bringing you joy?
I would love if we have a sec to just to list some things that people can do, like right now to help and
Okay.
that are easy. And I tried to come up with things like if you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, if you're time crunched, like
Ooh,
different options. And
okay.
so I feel very fired up post election too. Like
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna up my activist game here. So I have a list on here. Sorry, looking on my
No.
little tablet.
Go right ahead.
So here's some cool things people can do. Like I said before, boycott a product or a corporation that is doing damage to the environment, or participate, like I said, in a community thing like a beach cleanup or a bio blitz where you just go out and document as many wildlife species as you can find. You could create a piece of protest art and post it, or an essay, write that and post it. You can replace any exterior lights you have that burn all night long with motion activated ones, which are both better for security and also it really helps with wildlife. Like a lot of people don't know that birds migrate by using the stars. And if there's a lot of light pollution, they can get lost and collide with building glass and things like that. Plant pollinator gardens, which we already talked about, and leaving your leaves on the ground. Um, Buying recycled or bamboo toilet paper. Like you could really save a lot of trees and keep, because a lot of companies still deforest rainforests to make toilet paper. It's ridiculous.
And
Um,
you know what you can do is the plastic, at least my Trader Joe's recycled toilet paper, the plastic that comes around the toilet paper in a 6-pack or 8-pack, you can use that as a garbage bag. We were
yeah,
talking about, my friend and I, like, what can you use as garbage bags so that you're not using actual new clean plastic for garbage? Because it makes no sense. And you're like,
yeah.
oh, cat food. And yeah, toilet paper. It's awesome.
And you can get like trash bags too made out of like corn material that biodegrade. So that's a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then some companies like Cheeky Panda does this, and so does Kaboo. They actually have their bamboo toilet paper in cardboard already instead of that plastic.
Mm.
Um, and then you can, if your local utility is like running off a coal-fired plant, encourage them to transition a percentage of the power every year, like 4% over to renewables. And we would be way closer to that 2030 mark of reducing our carbon. So, and then another thing that's effective is writing letters to the editor of your local paper, and that can get community engagement going and people talking about it. So get out there and act and help the planet.
Yeah. And then, like, okay, how would you recommend people stay safe when they write letters to the editor? Because I think in these polarized times, one of the things you have to be careful of is that you're not making yourself a target.
That's an excellent question, Margaret, and I wish I had a better answer. It's scary. It really is. Maybe you could write with just your first name and but I don't really know the answer to that question. I did read this one thing about waging nonviolence, and
That.
one thing it said was don't obey in advance. So in other words, if
Yes.
you think some action you're
Writer.
going to take is going to get flack in the future,
Yeah.
don't let that stop you from acting now. Like we need to speak out, and it is scary. But if we're silent, that's just giving permission for these terrible things to happen. We need to like find strength in each other and speak out and act.
Yeah. Eloise says, yeah, I need to get more involved to bring the boy with me, the kiddo. Yeah. Jocelyn's considering her protest art submission already, it sounds like. There's a whole lot that you can repurpose. I know I do. Yes, get creative with that. Coffee cans are excellent storage, and butter containers. Cool. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, which one of my glass containers am I going to use for peanut butter? Because for some reason, peanut butter did not like go through the audit, and I keep buying peanut butter that comes in plastic. And I was like, wait a minute, I can get, bulk peanut butter. I just haven't like put that on that list and shifted it over. It's just like all these little things. Um, So Randy's asking, how can I get a signed copy of your books? I'll spend the time between now and New Year's Eve trying to design a resolution of the things I can do in 2025. That sounds marvelous. I love it.
Awesome. Way to go. If this appeals to you, what I've been doing, because I haven't really been doing book signings and traveling. I should do that while I'm traveling around with all my projects, but is if you want, I'm a painter as well, and I painted some little book plates, and if you want, I could sign one of those, and I could do one for each book if you want, and just send that to you. That'd be free. That's a thought if that would appeal to you,
Amazing.
Randy.
Talent. Some people get gobs of it in all different areas. Sometimes it's concentrated, sometimes it's spread out. Yeah, protest writing, microplastics. Yeah. Protest writing. I like it.
Protest writing, yes. Essays, letters.
Yeah.
And I really think, and I'll say this again, just acting locally. I mean, I write letters to my congressional representatives all the time, and it's like, is this doing anything? So yeah, local city councils, things like that, state governments. I think we need to start acting locally to really see a difference here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And be kind to yourself, be forgiving. I do things like make one step and then I get resistance and then I go, ugh. And then I don't have the button to turn that on a second time until like 3 weeks later because I met a brick wall. So it's all right. You have accountability buddies. You have inspiration that comes in cycles. Next time you get that wind in your sail, like sail out and make attempt number 2. It's okay. Just keep trying. Lovely.
And we'll keep trying to build community too, like with these starter packs. So we can talk to each other, we can strategize with each other, and maybe not feel as scared.
Yes. I love that. So we'll all have a spark and we'll share it and we'll have a roaring campfire together. I like that. So thank you so much, Alice, for coming on the channel and talking to all the audience about your lovely books. I'm looking forward to finishing Ghosts of Caribou. I'm at the beginning, so I only started it yesterday, but I'm excited. It's the audiobook. So I'm like, this is the
cool.
first time I've read an audiobook of yours. Yeah. And so subscribe to Alice on all the channels that you are on and like to participate in. Check out her books at your libraries. Definitely meet with people locally and raise awareness and then participate in all the steps that I wrote in as she was rocketing them out. So yeah, all the good stuff.
Thank you so much for having me on, Margaret. I always love talking to you, and congratulations on your upcoming release in 8 days. That's really exciting.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks for coming by. If you're watching on the replay, thank you. And we'll see you. Today is Friday. I will see you on Sunday. Take care, everybody. Happy reading.
Bye. Good night, everyone.